to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher? Here. Mr. Schron?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Brown, I believe Ms. Brown will be absent today. Ms. Stevens also will be absent today. Ms. Simon? Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Ms. Baker? Here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Council President Brady?
Here.
And I believe Mr. Tuma will also be absent this afternoon. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Catherine Chia, you'll step up to the podium. Catherine?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I am here today representing the Council on Older Persons, COOP. I am the chairperson. COOP is the 70-year-old standing committee of the Center for Community Solutions, and our members advocate for the needs and interests of older adults in Cuyahoga County. I'm here to support the Cuyahoga County Division of Senior and Adult Services, or DSAS, as a leader in addressing the needs of older residents. Food security, adult protective services, information and referral to long-term care services and supports, among many solutions. And we all know that as the county ages, senior needs will continue to grow. We're familiar with the evidence that tells us what's to come, but in this region, we know that the senior shift is already here. For example, Miami University School of Gerontology estimates that by 2030, the Ohio population age 60 and older will reach 30%. But the U.S. Census American Community Survey shows that in Cuyahoga County, nearly 1/4 of our residents are already 60 and older, and we have 16 local municipalities where their population is 1/3 or more 60 or older. And Cleveland State University's Fifth Migration Study has shown that Cleveland is home to the second highest concentration of baby boomers in the entire country. That's the city of Cleveland itself. So we know that access, socialization, nutrition, healthcare, and other services that support independent living are critical to older adults' physical and emotional well-being. On behalf of COOP, we commend Cuyahoga County for the job that it's been doing with the resources available to support older adults, but we also recognize that we all need to be prepared for the 2030 age wave. It's obviously already here. We encourage prudent infrastructure investments, innovative activities, and resources today that will allow providers to create and refine programs to ensure that we all keep pace with that growing need. On behalf of COOP, I ask that Council please support DSAS's request for resources in the current budget deliberation and beyond to prepare for that future. We know that the older adults who call Cuyahoga County home are often our most vulnerable citizens, but it's our responsibility to ensure effective programs and supports are available to them so that way they can stay in their homes in the setting of their choosing with a good quality of life and an opportunity to participate in their communities that they've called home. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody else signed in?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have just one item, which is our center of attention for this afternoon, Resolution 2019-0224. Please read that into the record.
Resolution number 2019-0224, adopting the 2020-2021 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. And we do have a substitute for your consideration for acceptance, and I'm going to call Trevor McAleer forward to explain the changes that are in the substitute. They are all just technical in nature. There's no policy changes. They were things that were inadvertently omitted from the original budget documents.
Good afternoon, Chairman Miller, Trevor Mackler, County Council staff. The proposed substitute includes 3 changes to reflect what's in the budget book, not what's included in the legislation that was originally introduced. And the 3 proposed changes also reflects what Director Maggie Keenan presented last week. They are 3 changes. One is to increase the prosecutor's office budget in 2021. It was presented to you that it would be 6 million, but for whatever reason in the legislation introduced to council for first reading, it had $5 million. So it reflects the technical change of including an additional million in 2021. But it is the dollar amount that was presented to you in the budget hearing preview last Monday. The second technical change is to correct the recommended budget for county council. What was presented to you last Monday was more than what was presented in the legislation, and that was also just a technical change. The budget book is correct, but the legislation itself did not reflect what was in the budget book. And the third and final change was a decrease in the title budget related to the charts of account. So it's accurate in the budget book, but again, in the legislation that was provided to council for first reading, it had $2.5 million more than what it should have. And this isn't uncommon. We typically see technical amendments in previous budget hearings. This doesn't increase the projected spend that was provided to you in the budget book or reflect any additional expenses than what was presented to you last week. But we thought it would be prudent to reflect in the legislation what is included in the budget book.
And normally we prepare copies of proposed substitutes, but because the updated information is already in the budget books, we thought that we would save paper and not print out copies. Are there any questions about the proposed substitute? May I have a motion to make the substitute the version before the committee? So, it's been moved and seconded that the substitute be accepted so that it becomes the version of the resolution that's before the committee. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it and the substitute is accepted. Before we start, a couple of preliminaries. I would like to encourage departmental representatives to watch the budget process on the live stream, particularly when we get into later sessions where we have diverse, different kind of departments on the same day, where it might not make sense for someone to be sitting here for the whole 4 hours while you can watch it on the live stream. And when we're getting pretty close to your department, you can come on down so that you don't have to spend a whole day. Second thing is that our budget person, Trevor McAleer, prepared 3 questions that are appropriate for the Health and Human Services departments this afternoon. And I'm going to read the questions, and I would like to ask each of the directors to kind of fold answers to these questions into their presentations so that we don't have to go through and one by one and ask the questions. And the questions are also in printed form on the lectern, so you'll have them in front of you when presenting. But the questions are: number 1, is the staffing level in your department the same as in previous years, and could you use additional staff? The second question is: what additional funding requests did you make for this budget, and were any approved? Which were denied? And the third question is: if we had a Health and Human Services levy increase, what are the 3 top areas that you would provide additional resources to? So if you could keep those questions in mind and include them in your responses.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
on question 1, could you also ask it in the converse? Would you ask for additional staff is what you ask? Could you work with less staff? It seems like it's a natural flip side of the same question.
That's fine. We'll accept that as a friendly amendment. Okay. So with that, I would like to call Health and Human Services Director Walter Parfiowitz to come and make the opening HHS presentation.
Good afternoon, Council Chair Miller, council members. Again, Walter Parfiowitz presenting for the County Executive's recommended budget for 2020-2021. We will follow Councilman Miller's format. I've asked all directors to keep all presentations to no more than 5 minutes to allow for discussion and follow-up questions from council. The Department of Health and Human Services 2020-2021 budget is approximately $364 million, with approximately 2,300 staff for each year. The revenue portion of the budget is made up of federal, state, and HHS levy funds to administer public assistance, children's services, and child support programs. This revenue budget includes $14.7 million in additional revenue from the governor's budget. This is primarily state revenue to support child welfare programs in the area of child protection, placement, and foster and kinship care. The revenue budget also includes approximately $1.6 million of federal kinship caregiver funding. The expenditure portion of the budget includes a 2% cost of living increase for employee salaries, 14% reduction in employee health care costs, continued funding of additional DCFS staff in the Harvard Community Center Neighborhood Collaborative contract that were approved in 2018, continued funding of additional DCFS staff that were approved in 2019 to address the number of children in county custody, continued funding of additional JFS staff that were approved in 2019 to reduce the average wait times on the contact centers. And finally, additional funding for the board and care costs and the Say Yes to Education program. Overall, we're not reducing or eliminating any existing programs, initiatives, or services. We do not have any new initiatives, but again, we have increased expenditures that were not part of the 2018-2019 budgets. The increased expenditures are in board and care for children in county custody and also the Say Yes to Education program. We continue to work on our two most important initiatives. Children in county custody. The number of children in county custody increased by 452 children from October of 2018 to October of 2019. Customer service in the contact center average wait times. The average wait times decreased from 27.2 minutes in October of 2018 to just under 16 minutes in October of 2019. Overall, we do not have any issues or concerns with the initial recommended budget for 2020-2021. At this point, I'll stop and ask for questions before I turn it over.
So, Director,
Yes.
could you get that put into written form and send it to us? So
Absolutely. I'm going to ask all directors to submit their talking points after the meeting today and submit them over to council.
and for the days after today, I would like to request everybody to submit their presentations in advance so that council members can have them in front of us when the presentations are being made. It just makes it easier for people to follow the presentation and prepare their questions. Questions for Director? Yes, Vice President Jones.
Just a little clarity on the three questions the chairman asked. The question 2 said, what additional fund requests did you make for this budget and were any approved? Were there any that you asked of and were they approved?
We did submit a number of decision items none of which were approved.
What were they?
We asked for money for early childhood in the Spark program. We asked for money for the options expansion for senior adult services. We asked for additional APS funding for staff. We asked for additional funding for a geriatric nurse, I believe. We asked for 1 crisis bed for Family and Children First Council. We asked for employee parking at Virgil Brown for child support and job and family services staff. We asked for tuition reimbursement for all HHS staff. And we asked for money for senior transportation. All of these items are laid out on pages 121 and 122 of the budget book.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, Councilman Shrine?
Yes, Director, you had commented that your wait times dropped. Could you go over those again? That's an important piece of information.
Of course. In October of 2018, our average wait times on the contact centers were 27.2 minutes. And at the same time, October of 2019, we're just under 16 minutes.
Okay, so you're less than 16 in a little more than a year. So you dropped 11 minutes,
Correct.
if I'm understanding that correctly. So that's almost, well, it is. That's well over a 40% improvement.
Correct.
How did you do that?
We reassigned our call centers. Different call centers handle different functions of public assistance, whether it's Medicaid, SNAP, so it's very specific. Now, if you call in and you're applying for benefits, you get routed to a call center to handle your issue or what you're applying for.
So you saved what would sound to me to be 40% of the administrative cost of taking that telephone call if you, at least during that period of time for the wait side, that you freed up. How many calls do you get?
I don't have that information. David Merriman's gonna present on behalf of Kevin Gowan from Job and Family Services.
Okay, so we're going to be able to establish how many hours of time was saved as a result of your efficiencies and effectiveness of operating government.
I would say yes.
Okay, and so it was saved because you changed your procedures, it sounds like.
Correct.
Is that something that could be done in other parts of the county to go through and review procedural steps to get this kind of gain?
Absolutely. I think there's
Absolutely.
efficiency everywhere.
And, I mean, ultimately, we hope that perhaps even technology could be helping you.
Oh, it is.
Pardon?
Technology is helping us. I mean, we have a very open dialogue with the state of Ohio. I mean, this is a state call center that we dial into. We use state computers, state telephones. They're helping us tremendously with just simple things like the menu options, repositioning them.
Yeah, that's a big deal for us, your procedural steps to save time.
Absolutely.
So ultimately, not looking to lay anybody off, but looking through natural attrition that takes place.
Sure.
Is this an area where, getting to my question, which was, could you work with less staff at some point along the way as attrition takes place?
I would think over time we could work with less staff.
Thank you.
We're currently sitting at about 40 vacancies in this division itself.
Thank you.
Councilman Gallagher?
Director, in your opening, you said you were satisfied with the budget from the executive. But yet when Councilman Jones asked you a question about what you didn't get, so you're satisfied with not getting that?
These are items that we've submitted now several years in a row, and we've.
And I know some things you're not going to get, but let me just focus on the seniors. I've been kind of on that train for a while, and quite honestly, I feel as though I've failed. And I don't think any of us on a human level like to feel as though we failed. And it's easy to sit here and say, where can we do better and what can we do better? And I know that the money that we have is finite. The young lady who gave testimony here is being kind in the way in which she said it, but the silver tsunami or the gray bomb that they call it, and I've become one of those. It's here and it's exploded, and we're ground zero in Ohio, and quite honestly, possibly ground zero in the United States of America. Yet you can't get a geriatric nurse. And I don't mean this literally, but I'm kind of offended that you wouldn't fight harder. Transportation, we all know how important that is. There comes a time, and you're not the only one. We've had previous directors who've tried and have not gotten what they thought necessary. I'm just wondering, are we at that point in time that we think outside the box? And it seems to be that the big question right now is having seniors, and I think it was a big question back when Dr. Jones was here, to letting seniors age in their home. Is there a way in which we could maybe start the discussion with a coordinated effort between the county and the various cities on some form of a deduction on their property taxes to go to these seniors who have built these communities, who have really, in many ways, lost their identity. These communities lose their identity when their senior population is huddled en masse into senior living places. And I'm not knocking that, it is what it is. But I sit in a city that, when I moved there 25 years ago, was one of the young, vibrant, up-and-coming cities, and now has become an older, aging city. And the problems that we experience are being experienced throughout the county. So I'm just wondering if we, at this point in time, should we not be in serious discussions about not just finding money from the HHS levies, but to find money that's already there, that's coming in, that maybe we could disperse to keep these seniors in their homes. And I was reminded of the troubles that seniors are having. I believe it was a week or two ago, a Plain Dealer did a story about a lady, I believe it was, that had to leave her house because of her property taxes. If anything, without committing a crime is criminal, that has to be close to one of them, in my opinion. So I'm just wondering if we could, from this end, work with you, with discussions with the executive, with a coordinated effort from the various cities to see if we couldn't possibly find a tax break for seniors to age in their homes. I'm just trying to think of something to do, because when I hear that you ask for things and you don't get them, that I find to be necessities, and in 2 years you won't get it again, as 2 years previous you didn't get it in 2 years. So I'm here 10 years now, and I'm really kind of sick and tired of just sitting here and taking that no like you're taking the no. So I'm in a position where we could try and find money in the budget. There's a tight budget. We have expenses that, quite honestly, nobody's talking about right now, and I intend to talk about them. But I think that is something that maybe we could do together. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I'd love to participate in that process.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Conwell.
Thank you through the chair, and to Mike Gallagher, I've talked to the treasurer about that, so good luck. To Walter P., is this the senior, I'm looking in the decision package, the things that have been denied, for the $100,000 for the senior transportation, is that your request, or is that the same as STCC?
It's ST.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's the same.
Okay.
Council President Brady.
I'm pretty sure that the councilman,
Okay, Ms. Baker.
Well, it won't take long, because, thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. It is along the same lines as Councilman Gallagher and Councilman Conwell, so I guess that's somewhat appropriate. Could you just give us a little more clarity on what you asked for, what you would have liked to have had from,
Of course.
For seniors director that that we don't actually see here specifically?
Yes, we had a request mid-year, as I recall, mid-year to potentially find some FTE positions for senior adult services, registered nurses coming over from the jail. Our understanding was we were going to get 6 to 8 of them, and we were going to use them in this capacity for adult protective services. That did not happen, which resulted in us submitting this request for APS staff.
Okay, so your request was for more FTEs.
Correct.
And,
More FTEs. We're asking for social workers.
Okay, all right, well, I just want to know that that's duly noted. I share the concern that I don't believe the county's been keeping pace, particularly given the demographics of the county, has been keeping pace with the needs of seniors. Again, I know we don't have unlimited resources, but I think that we have an obligation to try to help people and find ways to help people rather than not. And I would also just want to say I'm also have an interest in providing more transportation opportunities for seniors as well. So
I agree with you.
thank you very much.
Councilman.
Ms. Baker.
Can I respond? Just to my colleague and to the president, Brady, it's me and Walter have talked about this. It's kind of a misnomer because DSAS was promised the 6 nurses when the jails were being fluctuated over. And so those employees unfortunately didn't want to work for the county, but money was set aside in the budget for that to happen. And now that they don't want to, the employees do not want to get employed by the county, the need is still there of what the director was promised. So I just don't want that to slip by.
So, and Mr. Chairman, I've already asked Ms. Baker to give me a pause because we are having dialogue here. I guess that's a good thing. So what we're talking about is roll back about 6 months ago when we were trying to see if we could absorb some of the nurses that were losing their jobs at the jails who were members of a particular union. And we were looking for opportunities in Metro, and we found a lot of opportunities. We thought this was an opportunity, but these employees, which is their right, decided that they did not want to take us up on that. And so this goes back to the issue of trying to staff up the jails and bring Metro into the jails last winter, correct? Okay, just for some clarification.
Ms. Baker.
And along those same lines, I also was aware of the 6 to 8 nurses from jail, and hopefully the West Shore, we were hoping that might have been a direction that they would have taken.
Correct. That was our intention. They would be assigned to the west side.
Right. So hopefully this ask for social workers, are you still intending on trying to give some of the
Yes.
west side? Yes, that's good to know. Also a program that I know my district really values, but is very difficult for them to receive any success from, is the options program. And I noticed that in your list, options was not expanded. What would you have liked to have seen? What was your ask in trying to, because that's a program that we do try to keep seniors in their homes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Right.
that was our entire intent with the $800,000 request, was to expand the options program.
So 800,000 is the number you were looking for?
Correct.
And that 800,000, do you believe that would have adequately done what we need to have done in all of Cuyahoga County?
I believe it would have. It would have kept us off of waiting lists for this year and next.
Is that right? Okay. That's good to know. It's it's an important piece I think we all need to revisit. Thank you.
Director, that 800,000, that's an annual amount, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the director? I'm just going to ask one. When you look at health and human services broadly, we have two broad level functions. One is to respond to the needs out there and help those people who are in need of help, unfortunate, have handicaps or other disabilities or anything that where they need a little special assistance. The second part is to take an upstream approach and try to head off problems before they occur, so that people can achieve their highest level of healthy and successful functioning. And from our perspective, hopefully reduce some of the need for more expensive services later if those problems are not dealt with early. And so my question is, what more do you feel we could be doing in terms of upstream services that you think would make a difference and help improve the quality of life in Cuyahoga County above and beyond what we're currently doing?
I believe we should be looking more at kinship care in our Children and Family Services Division versus board and care. The Children and Family Services Director, Cindy Weiskettle, and I have had this discussion, and we're really looking at, what's better for the children. We know that it's better to be with your families than it is to be with strangers. And we see what we're paying in the way of board and care. We'd like to take some of the board and care money over time and divert it to kinship care, pay families to care for their kids versus paying board and care providers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else?
That's all I
And
have.
that's the main one. Okay. Ms. Baker.
Just the third question I'm not sure you answered, and that was the top three areas if we were to increase the HHS levy, putting aside, perhaps the options, which is 1.6 million, and the kinship that you just mentioned, I think is more of just moving money around.
Correct.
Senior transport, those don't look like huge asks. So what would be the three areas, if there are three areas, that you would think you would need to add to the HHS levy?
I'd say the third area is the contact center at Job and Family Services. We want to get that down to a more manageable number, say 5 minutes or less, average wait time for any client that calls for services.
And at this time, with the resources you have, you cannot achieve that goal?
Not currently. I mean, Kevin Gowan, the Director of Job and Family Services, he still has about 40 vacancies, which he plans to fill by December. We're going to reevaluate it at that point in time. The state's also provided us with a tool that allows us by function to sort of back into a number of staff based on our call volume by function. So we're going to take a look at that as well, see how well we're staffed with what the standard is.
So the 40 vacancies that you have, is that now in the budget to fill those vacancies?
Yes.
So that would not be if you had those 40 vacancies filled, would you then be at an adequate level to retrieve calls?
I don't think I'm in a position to really answer that just yet.
Okay. So your ask for increases in HHS levy is uncertain?
Uncertain at this point, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Through the chair to Walter P., I just wanted to bring up the employee parking ask, and I believe I've talked to Walter and Director Devers trying to get this done, and I know we don't want to pay for employees parking, but my issue here is that we are paying for a lot of employees parking, and it's not equity in the system. I can't remember when, but there was a couple of employees that came down here and spoke before us in front of our council meeting about that they're paying because of where they're located, a job at Virgil E. Brown Building. And so I've tried to work on that throughout the course of the year, not saying that the administration has to give everybody free parking, but maybe there's something equitable in terms of the employees that are paying can counterbalance that. So it's not like there's these group of employees, and Walter, I don't know how many employees that impact. Could you give us a number?
Well, we have 2,300 overall. We probably have between child support and job and family services, we probably have about 800 employees at Virgil Brown. They're the only ones who pay. Everyone else has free
Free
parking.
parking. So that's an issue I've tried to get some resolution to, so I want to just bring that up to everybody.
Councilman Gallagher.
Who's parking for free and where are they parking?
All of our leased locations, Old Brooklyn, Mount Pleasant, Quincy Place, they're all free, and also Jane Edna Hunter is also free.
Wow, I'm a fool. I paid 28 years. That's inequitable.
Agreed.
Oh, okay, so you learn something new every day.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Vice President Jones.
Before I ask my question, those spaces where there are free parking, do those tend to be in the residential areas as opposed to downtown?
No, those are parking lots affiliated with the buildings.
Okay. I heard Quincy Place, and I know that's in my area, and that's right here in the neighborhood, just a
Quincy
parking lot,
Place has quite a bit of parking.
and it's free.
It's free.
Okay. My question was on you said it was $800,000 per year for options. What is the ask for the senior transportation
$100,000.
per year?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Let me introduce Cindy Weiskittle, Division of Children and Family Services.
Okay.
And by the way, we're going to make one change. Kevin Gowan was called out on an emergency, so David Merriman's going to fill in for Kevin to do the JFS presentation.
Okay, so noted.
Good afternoon. At this time, we have about 2,900 children in the custody of Children and Family Services. This is the highest number we have seen in over a decade. We are seeing caseloads that are higher than we would want them to be, and the attrition rate among our social workers is of concern. According to a state report, there are 4,000 more kids in the custody of the state of Ohio in the last 5 years. If this trend continues, by 2020, there could be 20,000 children in Ohio in the custody of the state. We have in the new budget, most of any changes you see are related to board and care. We were given $8.6 million this year, and next year a proposal of $10 million to cover board and care. The other initiatives that we are working on are trying to fill our vacancies. So currently we have about 35 vacancies in what are called our frontline workers. We have worked on a couple of initiatives related to this. We have held 2 open houses this year at the agency, really bringing in larger groups of people at once. And we've also completed what is called a realistic job preview video. So it's a video of staff, it's about 20 minutes long, that really talks about what is it like to be an employee of DCFS as a frontline worker. We think between the video and the open houses, and we also do what is called behavioral interviewing, that we are getting more quality staff, but again, we continue to work with our vacancy rate. We will do 6 hiring classes this year. We will do 6 hiring classes next year. It's normally about 4 a year. So we're doing everything we can to fill those vacancies. The question about what would be the 3 things that we would want to see in addition if the money existed. Walter's touched on this. We would pay kin. So currently right now, over a third of our children are placed with kin. Kin, the only support that kin get is what are called child-only benefits. It's about $115 a month per child, but the amount goes down with the additional children. Most of our kin are eligible for food stamps, and they do get a medical card. We would look to do better than that. Hamilton County and Lucas County have started a program where they are paying their kin. So as I said, we have over 1,000 kids in kin care. It would impact boarding care, because even just starting to pay the kin, taking care of those 1,000 children. There is a lot of research that tells us that it is best for children to be with kin. Better placement stability, more permanency. But again, we're asking a lot of families by paying them $115 a month. A second thing we would be interested in is the idea around aging out children. So unfortunately, in Cuyahoga County, over 100 children each year age out of care. What that means is they've been in our care sometimes for 5 to 10 years, and at the age of majority, at the age of 18, if they have finished high school or a GED program, they go out into the world by themselves. The state has brought in a program called Bridges. Bridges is an opportunity for some of these aged out kids to get continual support up until the age of 24, but I think there's more work we could do there. And then the third issue, if given additional HHS levy dollars, I think we would really want to once again attempt to address the overrepresentation of African American children in the child welfare system. My understanding is the county is about 30% African American, yet kids in care, it's more like 67 to 70%. The longer you in care and child welfare, the more likely you are Black if you live in the state, if then you live in the county of, in Cuyahoga County. Other than that, we did not put in new initiatives other than the Say Yes to Education, as well as the additional board and care. We are not looking to make cuts. We do not believe we could do the job with less staff. And I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Director Wise-Kettle, I know we've talked about this issue over and over. In terms of the requirements that are for the kinship care versus foster care, because there's different requirements, would it, if we could expand the kinship portion of it, would the families still be held under the same accountability as foster care? Because that's where we've discussed and found out that there's a bridge with the African American families.
So with kinship care, regardless of whether you're a kinship care provider or a foster parent, there are certain requirements. We have to see your home and make sure that your home is safe. We do look at your child welfare history as well as your criminal history. The difference can be that some of the standards for foster care aren't as strict as they are for kinship providers. The other thing is many relatives don't want to become foster parents. It's a pretty lengthy process. You go through pre-service sessions, you have to be under every 2 years, your home is under review, you have to pass fire inspections, and of course these are all things we look at for our kids, but for our kin, we can do this in a different way. Okay. And so many of our kin just do not choose to, and there are some limitations for kin to pursue foster care.
And can you just please let my colleagues know how much a person that may or may not be a family member make a month versus kinship?
Sure. So as I told you already, kinship care is $115 for the first child, and then it goes down from there. For what is called agency foster care, which is what is considered level 1 care. So these are kids who have very little problems other than their children, and they need to be taken care of. Their cost they receive a month for reimbursement is $611. And if the child has a higher level of care, we pay anywhere from $900 to $4,500 a month for those kids to be in foster care.
Thank you, Director.
Other questions? Ms. Simon.
Thank you. So we've seen statistics that equate to the opiate and drug addiction crisis and how that's impacting our foster children and the increase in these numbers, which are astronomical. Do you see this trend trending down since we're seeing a slight decrease in the opiate crisis in the county?
So our data around the drug of choice is difficult. We have not always captured what drug brought a family into the child welfare system. We do have a smaller program called START, which is our sobriety treatment and recovery teams. This group of staff serve women who have a positive tox infant or the mother is positive at the time of birth. What I can tell you about those caseloads is that in START, in the last 6 years, we've gone from about a 2% opiate usage to a 17% opiate usage. So we are seeing some influxes, but the overall data that we collect is not typically drug specific, which makes this a harder conversation.
Is there anything that your agency would need to address the mothers of children, the mothers who have addiction to opiates, to cocaine? Is there anything additional you would need to help address this? Because that's really the connection I see statewide as well as the county.
Absolutely. So we are thrilled that last week, Armin Budish gave us money to restore the staff to the START program. We believe when START was fully functional in my agency, we were actually able to serve women in their second trimester. If they had a positive tox screen in their second trimester and were willing to work with us, we would start to work with those women while they were pregnant. What is great about that is if these women could maintain their sobrieties, those babies went home with them. We were having healthier babies, and babies weren't necessarily coming into care. The biggest concern you have about babies coming into care is around bonding. You know, mom is lucky if she's seeing her baby once a week. We know this is nowhere near what it needs to be for a woman and a baby to bond. And so the resources we were given last week will take us in the direction we need to go to try to keep more of these babies with their parents and or if not in their parents' care, with their kin.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have some questions, but we'll go first to Vice President Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up to Councilwoman Simon's question. You mentioned you didn't have a lot of statistics around the drugs, but you mentioned a 2% to 17% increase in opiates
In the last 6 years.
in the last 6 years. Do you have any similar data of how cocaine has impacted?
Our greatest drug of choice is marijuana. And part of that reason is because marijuana stays in your system longer than really any other drug. So the likelihood of us testing you and catching marijuana in your system is greater. Cocaine is going up. It is the second largest drug that we are dealing with. There is real concern that the carfentanil and stuff is being introduced into the cocaine and coming into our community, which could be devastating. It reminds us of the crack epidemic of the 90s. And we're concerned that if that happens, we could see a huge influx of kids in care.
Thank you.
Okay, Director, my first question is that you set as your third priority for additional funding.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
You did.
Well, it was the overrepresentation.
You talked about
yes.
the overrepresentation of African American children, and I think that's right on target. And I wanted to follow up on that and to ask you, not saying that money is no object, but saying that that we're willing to put substantial resources available to do what needed to be done, and you were given the chance to go out there and attack this situation. How would you go about it?
So what we have learned over the years when it comes to racial overrepresentation is that there is a tie-in to poverty, and that in many ways poverty and neglect can look very similar. If I'm a poor person and I cannot maintain housing, and all of a sudden my kids are living here and there and I'm not getting them to school, now you're talking about educational neglect. But really the core issue there is poverty. It's not the educational neglect. The poverty won't necessarily bring you to the attention of child welfare, but the educational neglect will. I think that what we have found is that this issue of overrepresentation is huge. My thought would be we would go out to academia and ask for support around what would be the strategies we would attempt to employ. Unfortunately, with Cleveland being one of the poorest cities in America, it puts us in a hard place. But I do think education is one thing. So what I can tell you is if you're going to have an opiate baby, go out to the suburbs. All the hospitals don't test. If you have the baby in one of our Cleveland hospitals, you're more likely to be tested. So there's it's the inequity of how the actual system is set up and how you're more likely to come to the attention of child welfare based on your economics. And so there are things that need to be done. I think some of it is education. I think when you start to talk about overrepresentation, other systems get very nervous about that. The police say we only arrest who we arrest, or the juvenile court says we only bring the cases before us that are brought to court. But then why are more black kids being brought in than white kids into that system? I think you would start with academia. I think we would start with trying to do an overview of what does the data look like in every system. I'm not sure every system even knows what their overrepresentation looks like. So I think it's a community conversation about, do we believe as a community that being black should bring you to the child welfare system, or should you come to the attention of the child welfare system due to issues of abuse and neglect? That would be my first thought about that.
Okay. My next question, particularly Director P put it graphically when he said that the number of children in custody increased by 452 just in the last year, which is highly significant. And my question is, do you see any sign of this starting to level off, or do you think that we're continuing to be in an upward trajectory that's going to continue?
It's difficult to know. It feels like it's creeping versus jumping. Mm-hmm. I think it's creeping at a slower level, but I'm not sure we're done moving upward. But we have kind of sat in this 2,900 place for the last few months. So it does feel like it's stabilizing a little bit, but I'm not sure that we're done climbing.
And what is the current number of direct service staff that's authorized, and how many of those positions are filled?
So we have the vacancy rate of 35. I have a total of about 500 frontline workers. So I'm not sure if that's what you mean. Do you mean in specific departments?
No, that's what I meant.
Okay.
So the total authorized frontline staff is 500?
It's just about 500.
And 35 are vacant.
Right. So our actual vacancy rate by child welfare standards is not horrible, but it's the attrition rate. In 2018, we lost about 15%. We're up higher than that, and if we continue at the rate we're going, our attrition rate this year will be about 20%. The reason that's so significant, the job is a job that many people take right out of college, so the training and actually having the skill set to do this job takes a good year or two. Mm-hmm. We're losing a lot of staff within that first 1 to 2 years on the job. So we're investing a lot of money and a lot of time into the training of staff, and then losing a good portion of those staff within the first year to 2 years. And so we've got to figure out what's that about.
So they come right out of college, they
Many.
train for 1 or 2 years, they move on, and then where do they go?
Sometimes to our private providers, so people who do contracted foster care or other programs. I think the other piece that we've been focused on, and we could probably continue to focus on, is what is called secondary trauma. So my social workers are like any other frontline responders. They're like the police or the fire. They see so much difficult stuff. They suffer from what is called secondary trauma. Basically, they're experiencing that trauma secondhand by experiencing their job. And so the work that needs to be done around supporting the staff is important.
So we're the training agency for other organizations that can pay more money and attract
Many times.
attract people into positions that are less stressful and pay more money.
Yes. And less dangerous, frankly.
And is there anything you need in terms of resources to improve the training and to reduce the stress level?
We have tried some programming with to address the secondary trauma. So we have a group of staff that are trained in what is called peer support. And so if a worker has a difficult case or a fatality, they support the staff with resources. We also have been working directly with more counseling. We have more counseling in our building at least once a week. I think these are great first steps. We have done a survey with our staff around their trauma. My proposal would be we would look to do some lunch and learns and/or like group sessions where people could really talk about the experiences they're having and helping them do something with that experience. So many of us live with remembering the most difficult cases we had, and that weighs on staff. So how we help them, deal with that trauma and sort of put it to rest, for lack of a better way of saying it, would help, I think, retain staff.
So in the budget book, the departmental total number of FTEs for 2018 was listed at 830, and it's listed at about 790 for 2020 and 2021. Why is it lower than it was in 2018?
Council Chair Miller, I believe that is OBM's calculation of FTEs. They take the salary and divide it by the number of hours and calculate a number. It's not an actual number.
So is the actual number of FTEs the same as what it's been?
Correct. It's what it's been last year, and we've added 20 staff that were approved in 19, and I believe 22 that were approved in 18. That should be the correct number.
But are you saying because of the way OBM does the calculation that the number of hours worked went down? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think that they used the salary number that they came up with, that they calculated a running rate of salary and backed into an FTE number based on hours in a year.
So does this mean that the volume of work went down, or doesn't it mean that?
No, it doesn't mean that. It means the salary number is projected lower. The salary number, the actual pay number, is projected to be lower than it has in the past.
So could that be as a result of senior people who are being paid more money leaving and being replaced by
Potentially.
entry-level people being paid less money?
I think it has more to do with our vacancy than anything else.
I find this a bit disconcerting.
I would agree.
Because it calls into question our ability to get a good understanding of what's going on in terms of staffing levels in the departments. I mean, it's not just this one agency. The same problem could apply to all of them.
Oh, I'm sure that it does.
So we're going to have to follow up with OBM on that. Okay. My final question is what changes have been put in place in DCFS as a result of the advisory process that we set up to improve the safety and effectiveness at DCFS, and are there remaining things that still need to be implemented but have not yet been implemented?
So the advisory board has met twice. They are scheduled to meet quarterly, but at their second meeting decided to meet every other month because they felt like there was a lot to digest and to get to know. We have done a lot of the recommendations that the panel had put in place after our, was called together after the Anaya Garrett fatality. We are working very hard to be more present in the community. We have done a lot of training of mandated reporters on their roles and responsibilities. We have certainly improved our work with dads, and the number of dads that we are seeing at different types of meetings has improved. We are working on, one of the issues that they identified was critical thinking. So when you do investigations, when you start an investigation, often a parent or another adult gives you an explanation of how this injury came to be. The idea around the critical thinking is to think about, is that the only way that injury could have come to be? So in other words, helping staff really think about all the hypotheses about what could have happened and making sure that they're doing a more thorough investigation, not simply writing down what the parents said happened. I think that work continues. We have a stronger relationship with the police. We have active MOUs with all of our police jurisdictions. We have a sheriff deputy that is now in my building, which has been incredibly helpful. The work with the schools, I think, will improve the work of child welfare. So some of the work with Say Yes to Education is directly linking up my staff with different schools in the Cleveland system. This will help with things around if the school is starting to have concerns, the relationship and how we can support each other before it results in a referral, or even helping figure out what the barrier to the education is. Work is ongoing in all things. We continue to strive to ensure timely investigations, thorough investigations. The best interest of children are always at the forefront of our thinking, but there's still lots of work that remains to be done.
And what are the most important areas where further improvement is needed?
So I am, again, thrilled to have my START staff coming back on board. I think the work we do with positive toxin infants will only be greatly improved with the addition of the staff. I think it will support stability in families. We could see in some cases a reduction in board of care for those children. I think the work we're doing around permanency. Again, we have over 100 kids leaving our system at 18 and they are totally on their own. So the work we are trying to do around family finding, around supporting kin, around really helping the family actively be a part of the plan for these children, I think will help improve the system and the outcome for children.
Okay, thank you. Vice President Jones.
Were there any budget requests made that might not have been approved that centered around improved safety for children?
We did not make any request.
Oh, you made no request?
We made no request.
I have a question, but I can't formulate it. There were no dollar amount requests. You saw no need for...
We believe that if we could move forward with the payment of kin,
Okay.
we would be shifting more dollars than we would be actually asking for additional dollars. It'd be who we would be paying versus how much we are paying.
Okay. So you have at least begun to lay out a strategy for addressing the Anaya Garrett situation, and you feel like you have done that. You were in the process of doing that.
Yes, I believe it is not the agency's only, it is not the job of just this agency to keep children safe. I believe it is the job of every person living in this community. Okay. To that end, we have gone out month after month to different communities and talked with them, see something, say something. The training of the mandated reporters, the work with our community collaborators. I believe all of that work does strengthen the safety net we have around our children. That being said, family situations can change in a moment. My staff could be out on their job at every moment, and a change in a child's life, something small, could cause that child all of a sudden to be unsafe. And we're hoping with the support of the community and our community collaboratives, we will be there to catch that situation if it happens.
Councilman Tron.
I think you indicated that the overrepresentation was You believe the direct cause of being the big driver was the poverty level? Is that, am I understanding the comment correctly?
Some research shows that poverty has an impact on overrepresentation of African American children in the child welfare system.
And I think you also indicated that there's 452 more kids this year in custody.
In comparison to this time last year.
Previous year. There's every indication economically that we're getting ready to look sometime in the spring as a slowdown in the economy, which is going to drive the poverty levels even further. What, if any, preparation are you doing? Because I don't think we're going to be static. I think it's going to increase again as the poverty level gets hit by an economic slowdown.
I think our best strategy would be to move forward on paying kin. I think if these children cannot be with their parents, paying family to take care of them would be the best outcome. I do think, based on what you're saying, you're right. We could see an increase of children in care.
Well, it's not me. I'm just reading unfortunately, the sad tea leaves out there in the economy as where it's potentially going to go. Okay, so this is the second time we've heard the strategy of paying kin. What says that monitoring is going to be any better than any other system to make sure that we're getting good care? Because we've got some pretty bad cases of kin not doing a great job either.
So in child welfare, some of the measures we look at are child stability and placement. So what the literature tells us that a child placed in kin placement over foster care are more likely to be stable in their placement. That a kin is more likely, if a child starts to have behavioral problems, to stick with that child. The child's ability to see their siblings. So when I place kids into foster care, sometimes two siblings go here and two siblings go there and two go somewhere else. And so maintaining that sibling relationship. But it really is about that kid is with its family, which is where every kid belongs. They belong with their family. And the research is very clear. Children who are placed with kin do better than kids placed in general in foster care. So for me, if I'm going to pay someone to take care of children, why wouldn't I pay their kin? The research suggests that's the best thing to do.
Okay, I guess my colleague and I were just talking about how 30, 40 years ago, the generations, you just took care of kin.
Absolutely.
At both the senior level and at the younger level.
But many of my kin live in the, right on the edge of poverty themselves.
Right.
So many kin step up and then they experience their own financial instability by taking in other people's children. I totally agree with you. Families 30 and 40 years ago, they just took their family in and they lived together. The reality is that each additional child to a household that is already struggling to make its ends meet are going to struggle even more with additional children in the home.
Right, and the amount of money is not probably a delta that actually covers the cost of the child care anyway, is it?
$115 probably does very little to take care of a teenager. As we all know, after they eat twice, you probably have gone through $115. At least by us looking at paying them at a rate more comparable to what we're paying an agency foster parent, I think it gives relatives a more fighting chance to be able to maintain those children financially.
Okay, thank you.
So, Director, to follow up on that, would the kinship payment be the same for everybody, or would it depend on what the economic condition is of the family that's receiving the child?
Our initial proposal is that we would pay kin. We're not looking at their economics. We really don't have, of course, we have children in care whose parents have a lot more money, but they are few and far between. We, in those cases, sometimes try to approach the court to even have parents paying for those situations, paying some of the support of their children. But again, those are really very few and far between. But the reality is this: if I'm a kin, why should my income impact me taking in somebody else's children? It should be about what's best for those kids, and I would think the money should follow the children.
I'm not advocating either position. I'm just asking what
Yes.
your intention is.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Simon.
A follow-up question. So if this makes sense statistically and intuitively that children do better with kin in a family, why has the trend been the opposite all these years? And why is this such a novel discussion now?
I think in the child welfare world, this isn't a novel discussion, but I think that we already are paying $60 million in board and care costs for kids in this county. I think it's, the reality is 10, 15 years ago, we had more foster homes. We had more people able. 34% of my kids live outside this county because I can't find foster homes in this county to take care of them. So they're further from their parents, and the greatest indicator of whether or not a child will go home is how often they see their parent. If I'm living in Oklahoma, and I do have children living in Oklahoma, how the heck am I going to get them home to their parents? So I think some of this is about the lack of foster homes that even exist. It is really difficult to find foster homes. When I was a worker, which was a lot of years ago, many foster moms stayed home and many foster dads worked. So the issue of daycare wasn't an issue. Now foster parents are two-parent working families like everybody else. So the cost of daycare, when I was a worker, you could come into the agency with a baby and that baby would have 4 foster homes before you got to the placement department. There are times I can't find a home for a baby. We now have a contract with Providence House because sometimes those babies go to Providence House because I don't have a foster home. Because people are not fostering and people cannot absorb the cost of daycare. And so kids that aren't in school are harder to place than they ever were.
So, Director, you're saying that it would help if we start paying kin. The question is, you're not saying it's going to cost you more money because it would save you money on the board and care side. What's stopping you?
So what initially would happen is there would be an increase. I have 1,041 kids in kinship care. We're not paying any of them. If we started to pay them, there would be an initial influx in cost.
So there's going to be an initial
It would
cost to
absolutely
get it
be.
started?
It would be.
Okay.
There would be.
So that's what we might need levy money for.
That's right.
Okay. Vice President Jones.
So I'm really more giving back to you what I've just heard. So it's not that 30 years ago people desired to help the children, but now they don't. I'm hearing poverty is an issue. You can't afford 2 working families, even low income, working class poor. 2 people income, but they're both working, and you have to pay daycare, and how do they even afford to do that? So am I hearing from you there is a willingness, and with paying kin, it would actually have an impact?
So I would say that years ago, as I said, many more families had one working parent and one parent that stayed in the home. So that's been a cultural change in our community, not just our community in America. But it is absolutely true that the cost around daycare will stop people from fostering little people. They just will. And so I'm not sure it's a desire, but just the economics that families have to both parents are working, or the household has 2 working adults in it if there are 2 adults in the home. And I just think it makes it less practical to try to be a foster parent. If you are a foster parent, we want you acting as the parent, meaning we want you to take that child for medical care. We're hoping you're helping transport children for visits. Well, again, if I'm a working parent managing my own kids, now I'm going to take in more kids. Just the complexity of trying to do that can become overwhelming.
Last, what is the dollar amount? Is there an ask in the budget?
We did not. We have started putting numbers together, but there was not a budget ask.
Okay.
So could you work on getting us a number on that?
Yes.
Anything else for the director? Okay, thank you very much. 4 million.
That's what they pay for kids.
Okay, fine. Okay, so now we are going to welcome Tracy Macy to speak to us about senior and adult services.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. You heard my colleagues share with you earlier some of the aging trends, so I won't go through all the data points that I have, but I do want to underscore that we are an aging nation, and according to U.S. Census, by 2030, majority of our population, older adults, will outnumber children under 18. So the age wave is happening, and we need your support to help us provide services and networks to stabilize our community. The need for DSAS services are expected to increase based on population trends. Our mission at Senior and Adult Services is to empower seniors and adults with disabilities to age successfully with vital resources and supports to live independently in their community, as well as be an active citizen. To advance our mission, DSAS recommended budget includes a 2% increase from $19.7 million to $20.1 million. The proposed budget will allow DSAS to maintain its current staffing levels, as well as support a 2% cost of living increase. I do want to note that we were able to repurpose one of our existing vacancies to hire and add a nurse that would focus on geriatric behavioral health. So we are thrilled that we were able to do that. Also, we were able to increase our adult guardianship contract by $50,000 to provide guardianship for individuals with cognitive and diminished capacity. This budget has allowed us to maintain our senior innovation work to identify best practices and new ideas. As you know, we fund many senior centers throughout Cuyahoga County to reduce social isolation. The $1.8 million appropriation would allow DSAS to maintain its community partnerships of 26 organizations, allowing them to serve on average about 2,500 seniors each month. The most recent increase in our options contract of $600,000 is now $2.8 million. It has allowed us to maintain a caseload of 1,200 clients. We were able to eliminate our existing waiting list, but as you can imagine, there's a high demand for this program, and resources are often stretched. We're able to maintain our bed bug program as well as our emergency assistance fund to support older adults in crisis. To address this anticipated growth of older adults and adults with disabilities, we must continue to build our core programs and community partnerships. Our strategic priorities for 2020 and 2021 includes food insecurity, housing, transportation, behavioral health, social isolation, elder abuse, and healthcare. I would like to share with you 2 comments that we have received from 2 individuals, and they stated, "I am so grateful for the options program. The sense of being alone and isolated has been a relief. I feel safer now. It is a wonderful program, and we need more workers like mine." Here's another quote from a senior who attended one of the senior centers. "I became a member in 1992. I joined the volunteer program. I am still having lunch and volunteering at least 4 days a week. It is my second home. At age 96, I am able to remain in my home with the help of God, my family, and the senior center." So that concludes my talking points for this presentation. I would like to highlight funding requests that were presented but not included in the budget. Is that what I heard? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you heard them earlier that Walter has shared with you. We had requested to add 4 adult protective services workers and 1 supervisor. As given the data, there's been an increase in cases by 20%. Over the last 10 years, our staffing level has remained the same at about 26 workers.
We also requested to add 2 senior assessment specialists that will work closely with our geriatric behavior nurse to build our behavioral health initiative to help us address the short-term needs of adults with mental health and substance abuse disorders. This team will work closely with community partners and making sure we're bridging services. Also, we requested increased support for our options program so we can maintain a caseload of 1,500 clients. We know tomorrow we will begin to generate another waiting list. And also by increasing to 1,500 clients, that is about the threshold with our current staffing level. And also, you heard individuals reference Senior Transportation Connection. We have requested to improve their operational capacity, or rather to support technology as well as expand their fleet. Was there one more question?
That'll be good for a start.
Okay.
Okay, so we are going to give everybody a few minutes to think about their questions for the director, and we're going to take a quick 10-minute break to keep us fresh. We will meet just before 2:40. Thank you.